Hey, it's Geek Reviews, and today we're going to review The Martian, starring Matt Damon. Let's just get right into it. Ridley Scott, the director of classics such as Thelma and Louise, Alien, and Blade Runner, as well as some newer great films such as Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, and, well, The Martian. He also made some overrated films, in my opinion, such as Hannibal and Prometheus. Anyway, the point is, he's a great director. It stars Matt Damon, as I said before. Of course, famous for many films such as Good Will Hunting, The Departed, and the Bourne trilogy. Alongside Damon is Jeff Daniels of Dumb and Dumber and The Crossing, and many other things. Sean Bean of Lord of the Rings, National Treasures, and Game of Thrones. Michael Penne, I think it's Penne, the hilarious guy from Ant-Man, and a brief cameo by Donald Glover, comedian and rapper. There are more, of course, but I don't feel like going into it. Okay? Alright, story mode time. Matt Damon's character, Mark Watney, is deserted on Mars by his crew as they thought he was dead after being struck by debris. He then wakes up alone and has to basically figure out how to survive on the planet by himself and eventually communicate with Earth so he can get home safely. He obviously does communicate with Earth as seen in the trailer, and NASA begins working on a plan on how to save Watney, and drama ensues. That's basically the plot. Let's move onward to the bad. The first thing I'd like to mention is that it could have been all Watney. They could have kept it all on him for the entire time, and I think it would have had a chance to be even better than it was. But I don't know that. He's funny and sarcastic and confident enough to carry a whole movie, and other films like Lock in 127 Hours did something similar, and they both really worked. I of course suggest they shorten this if they were to pull a stunt such as that, or maybe just shorten it anyway, as it was long, partially due to the unnecessarily large cast. And I know they wanted to include all the loved characters from the book, but film is an entirely different medium, and unless you're going to make a 10-hour movie, you have to cut some stuff out. And I know, they probably cut out a lot and then got book lovers all angry and stuff, but if you're going to cut out a story arc, cut the character out that the story arc pertains to, and you can assign that arc to a different character. Here's an example. Donald Glover, he came in, he was all like, hey, I'm gonna explain the most important thing in this movie. And then he left, never to be seen again. That's literally what happened. And that's a shame too, because Donald Glover is hilarious. Even the brief moments he was in this, he was funny. But you know what? Whatever. I didn't read the book, so I'm not certain about any of my book-to-film rant stuff, but it's a well-educated guess as to what happened. Anyway, another bad thing is the montages. While interesting for the most part, they ran on and they were usually redundant. I'm of course talking about the Damon preparation montages. They were cool, yeah, but if you shortened them or took them out altogether, it probably would have made my film experience a little more enjoyable. This film was hilarious, but there were a few jokes that just didn't work for me. They weren't quite cringeworthy, but I don't know. The timing and delivery of them just didn't work. This isn't a big issue, as these are few and far between, but most of the comedy and delivery is done quite well, but just a few instances of the not quite cringeworthy, but getting close to failed jokes. For me, of course. One final negative. The PG-13 held the film back at times. They dropped one F-bomb, and then it seemed as if they were trying their best to avoid any more. It just didn't seem like the only F-bomb Watney would drop was in anger. He's just not that type of character, or at least doesn't seem that way. He even types F-bombs, but he only says it once. I don't know, this is more nitpicking, so moving on to the good. First of all, Damon's character, Mark Watney, is sarcastic, funny, witty, and hilarious, and as I said before, I thought he could carry an entire film alone. He's just so snarky and cocky, but all while being an all-around awesome guy, somebody that I'd love to hang out with, despite the fact that a quarter of the words coming out of his mouth would elude me. Damon really does great portraying him as well, as he usually does, and other actors also do pretty good. Michael Penne is funny, as usual. Well, I've only seen him in one other thing, but he was hilarious in that, so. Kate Mara does well. Jeff Daniels does great, portraying the closest thing that this film has to a villain. But he really isn't a villain. He wants Damon to get home safely. He's just a pessimist, which works in favor of the realism of the film, because there wouldn't be some sociopath working at NASA trying to prevent an astronaut from living. The worst there could be is a pessimist. Well, I guess there could be a sociopath, but that's unlikely. And that's another thing. The film just feels real. The way it's shot and told feels like it's a true story. I was expecting those where they are now things to pop up at the end. I'm not sure if they were going for this, but it worked. All the sciencey stuff seemed probable, except maybe the climax, but it was still entertaining. But what do I know? Also, Damon's means of survival on Mars were just extremely interesting, just to watch him science everything up. The way it was shot and edited was so entertaining, and the explanations made it all seem very possible, which they very well could be. How would I know? Moving on, Watney and his crew, the crew that accidentally abandoned him on Mars, have great chemistry. You can tell they're all good friends and that they've all spent years in a spaceship together. Their interactions, both in comedy and drama, are entertaining to watch and just seem so real. Also, the story is told very well, and the pacing is perfection. I was never really bored, partially due to the beautiful visuals and landscapes of the vast planet that is Mars, and the amazing special effects. They never failed to impress. All while being surprisingly hilarious. Alright, not as surprisingly hilarious as another Michael Penne film, Ant-Man, but it still was pretty funny. A lot of people on the interwebs are comparing this to Interstellar, another space adventure film that came out last year, so why shouldn't I? In my opinion, this is a superior film to Interstellar for several reasons. One is its defined personality and just all-around sense of humor, along with being visually stunning and telling a good story. Second being the acting and just all-around feel of the film, that it really happened, which Interstellar may be possible, but the acting and storytelling just don't make it seem like it is. Don't get me wrong, I like Interstellar, but just not as much as I like this. But 2001 exceeds them both. Anyway, in the end, The Martian is a great survival film with great realistic acting, characters, and story despite the out there plot, no pun intended. Damon does great. His character and the entire film is just very funny. The effects and visuals are stunning as usual for a Ridley Scott film, with just a few minor problems with the book-to-film transition. But The Martian is one not to be missed, and will most likely be an Oscar contender this year.